also see what's going on. So welcome again, everyone, and thanks for being here at my first time home seller webinar. I wanted to do this webinar because there's a lot of resources out there for first-time buyers, but I feel like there's not a lot out there for first-time sellers. And my clients have told me this too. And usually when you're selling, it's been quite some time since you bought the home. So things may have changed. And especially right now with the current COVID situation, a lot of things have changed this year. So I wanted to put this together because I feel like anytime you're entering into a real estate transaction, it's a big deal. And the more informed you are and the more educated you are, the more confident you feel. And therefore, you can make better choices too and have less stress around the whole thing. All right, so let's see. It's 12:04, so let's get started. All right, so if you haven't met me yet or haven't worked with me yet, just a little bit about me. I'm a full-time realtor and I'm with Keller Williams Realty. I'm out of the Cambridge office and I actually live in Stoneham. But I have about 10 years experience in the greater Boston area. I work from Boston, Cambridge up through the North Shore and sometimes south of Boston, but mostly north of Boston. And I've chosen to specialize in working with home sellers. I do work with buyers too, but most of my business is actually on the listing side. And I really enjoy that because, in my opinion, the beautiful thing about real estate is that your home is also an investment. And when you're selling, it's your opportunity to reap the rewards of that home ownership, right? Which is sometimes difficult, and you're maximizing the equity in your home. So like I said, I always aim to educate my clients and help them make their best decisions in the market of the moment regarding marketing, negotiation, and the transaction process itself. My team name is Big Picture Realty, and I named it that because I have a filmmaking background, first of all, but also it reflects my belief that each real estate transaction is a part of the bigger picture of my clients' lives. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Typically, it's part of a major life transition, such as a marriage or a new baby, a job relocation, or some other life event. And also from an investment perspective, it really can be the foundation of a family or an individual's financial future if leveraged effectively. So my job, as I see it, is to be a great listener and to then help my clients realize their vision, to first understand it and then help them get there. So in effect, I think it's a lot like producing a movie. I'm learning about your vision and then helping it come to life. And yeah, so that's me and my husband, gosh, 11 years ago now. And I show you this because this was right before we sold our first home. And this was a turning point in our lives big time because it was our first child, our son Benjamin. And we had just bought a condo in LA where we lived for about 4 years, both pursuing filmmaking careers. But after we had Benjamin, shortly thereafter, going back to work in these very high pressure jobs in Hollywood, long hours, we had a change of heart and we decided to move back to the East Coast, where both of our families live here. And we just didn't, our priorities shifted after having that baby. So, and with that, it was another cross-country move, this time with an infant and 2 cats. And that property represented all of our assets. There were also a lot of emotions involved, with wanting to spend more time with Benjamin as a new mom, changing careers, and starting fresh in Boston. It was a lot to navigate. There was stress and also excitement, but ultimately that sale opened my eyes to the potential of real estate and how to add value to a property, which we did to get it sold in a down market at the time. And that became a new passion for me. It also gave me a real understanding of the challenges that home sellers face and the importance of a calm and trusted advisor to lean on during that time. I know I don't know what I would have done without my real estate agent at that time. But enough about me. I want to dive into some of the frequently asked questions that I hear from my seller clients today. And as I said in the beginning, if you have questions along the way, feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box. But the first and foremost question that I get is, when is the best time to sell? And if you live in New England, you probably know that traditionally the hot selling markets are spring and fall, right? This year has been different. The spring market was pushed into the summer. But what I believe is most important in determining the best time to sell is, besides your own life happenings, obviously, is the factor of supply versus demand in the marketplace. We all know that the basic law of economics governs how much a buyer will pay for any given product. So if you were to go on the market in a quote unquote off time when inventory is lower, you may find you have less people looking than the hot spring market or fall market, but chances are the motivated buyers will actually be willing to pay more due to the lack of inventory. Warren Buffett, you may have heard, is famous for saying zig when others zag. So if you're looking for the best possible price and you have the option, go on the market when less people are selling. It sounds obvious, and yet as human beings, our natural instinct is to go with a herd. So it is counterintuitive too. But the law of supply and demand decrees that doing that, going on the market in the off time, is the best, is in your best interest. And right now, as a heads up, the market is definitely weighted in favor of sellers. Inventory is still very low. And there are many buyers shopping because of the ultra low interest rates, right? I mean, they've never been lower. And of course, these dynamics may change, because if we go into a recession and or foreclosures start hitting the market, God forbid, but it may very well happen, then there'll be more supply and the tables could turn, and the market could favor buyers. So if you're thinking of selling in the next year or two, maybe it's food for thought. Could you push your time frame up and do it while supply is low and demand is high? Any questions about that? Okay, great. All right, so
I apologize. I don't have a question about, but I thought I was supposed to be registered for a first-time home buyers course, and it's not that. I do apologize. But I'm going to. I mean, the information is maybe needed down the road, but not right now. So I don't know how to get involved with that. So I won't mess you guys' time up. I'm gonna excuse myself out of the meeting.
Okay, but, no problem.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes. Bye-bye. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. As a seller, you'll want to be aware of the cost of selling so you can calculate your net proceeds from the sale. So whenever I do a listing presentation with a potential seller, I prepare a sheet much like this with an estimate of the selling price range, as you'll see on the top, and then all the associated costs so that there are no surprises to the seller. And the costs do vary from state to state a bit. And in Massachusetts, the seller is responsible for paying the commission, which is then split with the buyer's broker. Then they pay stamps tax, which is a state tax, which calculates out at $4.56 per $1,000 of sale price. So it usually ends up being $2,000 or $3,000, somewhere around there at the end of the day. Then they pay the attorney's fee, which is a flat fee. And quick side note, always use a real estate attorney. I know some clients, they say, oh, my estate attorney or my divorce attorney can do real estate too. Sure, they can. And yet, if they don't do it every single day, then there might be things that they're not familiar with. And sometimes, if they're not specializing in real estate, their unfamiliarity can cause a deal to go sideways. I've seen it happen. So just like you wouldn't go to, you know, a podiatrist for an eye problem, don't go to another attorney for a real estate problem or real estate transaction, I should say. Stick to the specialists. And again, it's a flat fee. They're not going to charge you hourly. And typically it ranges from about 1,000 up to like 1,300 or so, 1,500 maybe. And they will, the seller's attorney will prepare the purchase and sale agreement, and they'll review any revisions and addenda that the buyer's attorney will provide. They can also attend the closing on your behalf if you provide them power of attorney. I always recommend doing that, and even more so during COVID, but also it just reduces liability for you because you're not sitting in the same room at the closing with the buyer for a period of time, as well as it's just way more convenient because sometimes closings are not, the time is not confirmed until the day before. So you don't have to have your whole day open. You can have all your documents done ahead of time, and then the attorney will take care of everything on your behalf on the actual closing day. The other costs are the smoke certificate, which in Massachusetts, sellers are required to provide that at the time of closing, stating that, you know, all the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are working and in the right locations. And that's typically $25 to $50. It varies by town or city, and you'll have your town or city fire prevention department come in and do that inspection for you. I do arrange that for my sellers. And then lastly, for single family homes, we'll need to get a final water bill, and that's typically like $25. And for condos, we'll have to get a 6D certificate. There's no cost for getting that. It just states that there are no liens being transferred with the property. So basically all the condo association fees are paid, or if there's any assessments, they're paid up to the date of the closing. Also, there might be like miscellaneous recording fees, usually $200 or $300. So you see that in there too. Again, I just don't want any surprises. But the nice thing is that for the seller, all these costs are paid out of the proceeds of the sale. So nothing is actually required upfront. It's going to be all handled at the settlement for you. The closing attorney will disperse the checks, and then you'll receive a check or a wire for the balance of the funds, whichever you prefer. And that's the number you see at the bottom here. So again, if we meet regarding your property, I'll create a breakdown of like this for you and your property. Any questions? Okay, great. And okay, so maybe this is the elephant in the room. Some people might be thinking, well, why not save the cost of the commission and handle this on my own? And yes, you could post it on Zillow or some other sites for free. However, these are the main reasons to hire an agent to represent you, whether it's me or someone else. This is, after all, one of your largest assets, and you want to make sure that the sale is handled properly. Your agent, if they're full-time, local, and experienced, knows the market like the back of their hand because they work in it every day. They're professionally trained in negotiation, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect your interests every step of the way. In fact, I would argue their services pay for themselves and then some. And I'll show you what I mean right here. So studies like this one, and this is by Collateral Analytics in 2017, have found that agent-driven sales are higher on average than for sale by owner sales. Why is that? Well, going back to the law of supply and demand that we talked about before, the more powerful your marketing is, the more exposure you'll get. And what happens to the price when more people want the same thing? It goes up, right? Just like at an auction, for example. So you want to make sure you have the best marketing possible. It has a direct impact on your price. Also, buyers who look at for sale by owners are doing that because they're looking for a deal. It's just like if you were to go shopping on eBay or Craigslist versus going to the mall. When you go to Long's Jewelry, for example, to buy a ring, you know you're paying market prices. It's no secret, but you also know that it's a legitimate piece. And if there's any issue after the fact, you can go back to the merchant. And it's the same thing, you know, with home buying. The buyer and the seller can't both save the same dollar. And the buyers who are willing to pay the top of market prices are not shopping for sale by owners. They want to work through a licensed, reputable broker. Also, with an agent, you have third-party professional negotiation. We negotiate all day, every day. And even if you are a trained negotiator, when you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own money at stake, it's tough to stay cool and make your best decisions. It's really best to have someone at an arm's length from the transaction advising you. All right. So again, open any questions. All right, so a lot of times when people are selling, they're also buying. And that in itself can cause quite a bit of stress for people. People are wondering about how to time the transactions, how to make sure they're not homeless or carrying two mortgages. So naturally, you know, many people come to me and they say they want to find their new home before they sell. However, if you're like most people and you need to sell in order to buy because you're planning to roll the equity from your existing home into your new home, it really is better not to do it that way. In fact, you'll likely lose money because with a home sale contingency, meaning you're submitting an offer, but it's subject to selling your home before you can close on the new home, you'll have to increase your offer price to make it appealing at all to the seller of the home you're trying to buy. And when you have the home that you want under agreement, assuming that you can get it that way, you'll either have to pay two mortgages or sell quickly so that you're not carrying both homes for very long. And that could mean lowering the price on your existing home that you're selling. So I would say don't put the cart before the horse. Again, it's a seller's market right now. So I would sell the current home, and while it's under contract, then you can shop for the new home. You'll be a much stronger buyer, but if you feel pressured for time, and that's understandable, I always recommend doing a use and occupancy or a rent back with your buyers. So you're renting back from the new owners basically for a period of time. You could do like 2 to 4 weeks or up to 60 days. That's usually the limit. That takes the pressure off from having to find the new home right away and also from having to do 2 closings back to back. So I think it makes it a much smoother transaction and much less stressful for you. Now, if you had a cash buyer, you could actually extend that for as long as you want, like 6 months, a year, if you had a cash buyer on your home. But the 60 days is a limit because the lender is lending to that buyer as an owner occupant, not an investor. So they have to move into the property within 60 days. Now you could also make the sale of your current home subject to finding the new home so that you have even more flexibility. So that way you reserve your right to withdraw from the deal as a seller if you don't find a home you love within a designated time frame. So we would just put on the listing that the sale is subject to the seller finding suitable new home. And this strategy could mean that we decrease the buyer pool a little bit because it means buyers have to be more flexible in their timing. But again, you know, as a seller in this market, you really are in the driver's seat and you can kind of dictate the terms. So if this makes your life easier and saves you some stress and anxiety, then by all means, we can absolutely do it that way. Any questions? Okay, great. Let's move on. So here is an overview of the listing timeline from the seller's perspective. And you'll notice there's 3 steps before active marketing. And that's why I say that it's never too early to meet with your agent, and you'll get an idea of what you can expect to sell your home for, and also what you could maybe do to improve the marketability and value of your home. And you never have to do anything. I can sell a home as is, no problem. But if you want to maximize the equity in your home, there's usually some things you can do. And depending on your goals and your budget, prepping the home for showings might take a few days or a few months. So at our initial meeting, we'll put a tentative timeline on the calendar for photos, when to make the listing live, and when to have the first showing. You'll decide how long that you need to declutter and maybe do repairs or touch-ups, move furniture into storage, and possibly do some staging. I will advise you on staging. Oh, I see a hand raised.
Hi, Carrie. I have a quick question. So when staging the property, do you like have to pay for an outside photographer? Or does the agent do the photography? Do you do that photography?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do the photography. I pay for the professional photography
Oh, okay.
and also virtual tour and interactive floor plans
Oh, okay.
so that we can make a real big splash online, because that's where the buyers are. They're
Mhm.
looking online. So yeah, I include that with my service. So you don't have to pay for any of that up front. I also include some light staging. So I help you using what you have in your home,
Okay.
rearrange or do some light staging, things like that. If we want to bring in a professional stager, and that's entirely up to you, that would be your expense, but I can introduce you to stagers who can do it at different budget levels. I have some that do it very reasonably.
Well, how much is it normally the price range for something like that? Where's like the starting point?
For staging, it varies a lot because it depends on whether it's an empty house, how big the home is and things like that. But I recently had a stager do like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, and it was around $2,500, which I think
Oh,
is
okay.
extremely reasonable because that includes the rental of the furniture and also them coming in and setting it up and then taking it all down, and it looks gorgeous,
That's great.
so
Oh, it sounds great.
that's like
Thank
the
you.
lower end. It can go much higher, but that is the lower end and they do a great job.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so basically, like I said, I'll advise you on staging, give you tips, ideas. Decluttering is the number one thing. I mean, we all have a ton of clutter. It's just, we live in our homes, so that's how it goes. So I always advise to just, start packing and put things away, either in the basement. You could rent a pod or put it in storage. Maybe just get rid of a lot of stuff. But decluttering is always the number one thing, because we want buyers to come in and kind of see themselves living there, see the rooms, it's themselves and the space and not the stuff in them. So, but beyond that, like I mentioned just now, we can also talk about staging if that's something that you're interested in to maximize your value. All right, so then we move into the listing setup phase. And whenever you're done prepping the home, I'll have my professional photographer come in and do their photos and virtual tour, interactive floor plans. In the meantime, I'll be working on the listing details and making sure we have a super thorough listing. I want to have everything in there. I'll also ask you for your favorite features of the house so I can make sure that those are highlighted. And this way, when everything is thorough and accurate as possible, it empowers the buyer to make a strong offer right off the bat, because they've got all the information they need to do that. And then once I get the marketing media back, I'll send you over the draft listing to review and approve, and we'll firm up the showing strategy. With the showings, you can either block out times that don't work for you, We can request 24-hour notice, 48-hour notice. We can do an open house or multiple open houses or only do private showings. It's really all based on your preferences and the market dynamics too. I'll advise you on what's working really well. And right now, because of COVID, you know, some sellers are doing different things. Some are like leaving for the weekend and we're just doing showings all weekend. Or, you know, they only want to do accompanied showings, so the agent has to be there at all times. You know, it depends on what your situation is. If you have high risk people or children, it might be different. But anyways, you can make that mutually agreeable and safe, and everyone has to wear masks, of course, and all the other protocols during COVID. Donna, did you have another question?
No, not this time.
Okay. Want to make sure. Okay. So then comes the big day when I activate the listing to the MLS and over 400 other websites. We fully saturate the internet because, again, that's where the buyers are looking these days, right? We also do social media campaign, targeted ads, and send the listing directly to other agents who have buyer matches. And we also invite neighbors to share with their families and friends. We used to invite neighbors to the open house, but that doesn't really make sense anymore with COVID. You know, we don't want to cram the open houses, but we do ask them to share the virtual tour via email with people in their circle of friends and family or people that might be moving to the area. And they love to have the opportunity to help choose their new neighbor. So we leverage their networks that way. All right, and then when we have an agreeable offer and we're under contract, then we set the closing date, arrange the inspection, and your attorney starts drafting the purchase and sale. Once we have the signed PNS, if the buyer is applying for financing, they go through their loan approval process. I'll get a call to schedule an appraisal of the property. And that's usually a very quick visit from the appraiser. They walk through, take some pictures, and then they prepare their appraisal report. And that's kind of the last major hurdle in the transaction. Most of the time it's not an issue. Usually the only time I've seen it be an issue is if we have a major bidding war and you know, the purchase price goes way over asking. Sometimes that can prove to be an issue in the appraisal. But you know, one of the great things about having multiple offers is that you can kind of pick and choose the buyer and the offer that works for you. So of course, I'll always do my due diligence as I'm presenting offers to you of talking to the buyer's lenders and making sure that they are really well qualified and shoring up the transaction as much as possible so that we don't hit any snags during the appraisal. Okay, and then if there is a discrepancy in the appraisal, what happens is the buyer could ask to renegotiate the price. They could withdraw if they have the mortgage contingency, or they could decide to bridge the gap by bringing more cash to closing. Okay, and then before closing, the seller, like I said, gets a smoke certificate from the fire prevention department, proving that everything works as far as smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and I will facilitate that. Single family homes, the seller gets a final water reading, and condos, we get the 6D certificate signed by a condo association trustee, and I also facilitate that as well so that you can focus on your move, right? And then about 3 days before the closing attorney will issue a closing disclosure, which if you remember when you bought, you also got that document, and it outlines the money being exchanged at the closing table by the seller and the buyer. Once that's issued and approved, we're ready to close. And by the way, if this seems overwhelming, don't worry, because we'll walk you through each step and tell you what to expect next. But does anyone have any other questions about the process? All right, so I just wanted to show you a quick testimonial from some recent sellers who actually also bought as well. I love hearing this, that it was stress-free because real estate can be super stressful. So they said Carrie and her team were amazing. They sold our home for more than we expected and coordinated the timing of our 2 closings to make our move as stress-free as possible. They were very communicative and always available for questions. We were always kept in the loop. We really felt as though they cared about our family's needs. We highly recommend Carrie and her team, Carol and Bob. And there are more, lots more reviews on Zillow too, if you care to check them out. So I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes that sellers make. I don't know if anyone has any guesses. Drum roll, please. So yeah, I have to say, this is probably the biggest mistake that sellers make. It's overpricing. And, you know, it's super tempting to overprice because, you know, we think, well, we'll put it on for a high price and kind of, we can always lower it later. We'll pad it for negotiation. Maybe the Zestimate is inaccurate. Maybe other realtors are telling you what you want to hear just to get the listing. But when you overprice, you really do self-sabotage that first impression on the market, which is so important. You know, when you're thinking about pricing, put your buyer's hat back on. Home buyers are looking for value and features, and they're comparing what's on the market and deciding where they can get the most value, and that is going to be the home they're going to buy. And yes, it is, again, a very hot seller's market. So you might think, well, let's start high. But because it's a seller's market, it's also a super fast market. And so you have to be careful, because if your home doesn't sell in the first weekend, it already is starting to look stale to buyers. They're already saying, well, why didn't it sell yet? Why wasn't there a bidding war? Because that's the norm right now. And even more so, you know, buyers are they've been trained to assume that there'll be multiple offers on a good house in today's market. So if you're putting, let's say you think your home is worth $500,000, just for example, and you're like, well, I'll put it on for $550 and see what happens. The buyers are assuming that that house is going to sell for $600. So even though they may be able to afford $550, they're not even going to make an offer because it's out of their budget, they think, because they think it's going to go over asking. Does that make sense? This literally just happened over the weekend with some of my buyers. Their budget was $550, and we saw 2 homes on Sunday. One was listed at $500 and one was listed at $550. They liked them both. They're both beautiful homes. But they felt that if one listed at $550 would go too high and they wouldn't be able to compete. So they end up just making the bid on the $500,000 one. Turns out they had to actually increase their bid to $565 to get the home, which they were perfectly fine with. But I got a call from the listing agent from the $550 home this morning saying, are your buyers interested? They seem to really like it. And I said, you know what? They made an offer on another home because they didn't think they could compete for this home, whereas it actually didn't sell. So that's just, I thought I would use that as an example to potential sellers of why you don't want to overprice your home. If that other home that they didn't bid on had been priced at $500, it too would have sold for $565, but it didn't. So another piece of buyer psychology is that, you know, buyers do typically start with a lower budget to save money because everyone wants to save money. And yet they'll ultimately stretch it because they understand that in order to accommodate the lifestyle they desire and the home type of home that they desire, they're going to have to stretch a little bit, and they make that happen. So if you overprice, they're not even going to consider your home. In effect, you're pushing them away. So if the asking price is within their desired budget, they'll see it, they'll fall in love, and then may very well stretch their budget to get it. So my job is to make your listing a buyer magnet, and price is the #1 marketing tool to do that. And when you're looking at homes, what's the second question you ask after you ask about the price? Well, it's how long has it been on the market, right? And what's the reason you ask that? It's to see how much you can negotiate. So again, when a home is priced right in this market, it will have a bidding war in the first week. When a home sits on the market for more than 2 weeks, it loses that initial heat. It looks stale, and buyers assume either something's wrong with it or it's overpriced. So you almost lose any possibility of having a bidding war after that first week. So it's not the best way to get your best price. And pricing competitively is an art and a science. It requires a keen understanding of the market and how buyers look for homes. Any agent can tell you what you want to hear to get the listing and then just work you down later. But you want to work with an agent who will tell you the truth up front, even if they don't give you the highest estimate, because in the long run, it will pay off. And I'll do a thorough market analysis for you and go through not only the sold comparables, but also what's currently on the market, because that represents your competition. And together, I'll give you like a price range that I think is a marketable price range. And then together we can decide on a competitive price positioning for your home. You're always the boss because it's your home, but I'll explain to you exactly how, going on the low end of the range or the high end of the range I give you could affect your time on market and your possibility of getting multiple offers and things like that. Any questions about that? Awesome. Well, it's about time to wrap it up. I am just going to review the main takeaways. So as I mentioned, pricing and presentation are prime importance to getting your best price. It's a lot of P's. We can, of course, help you get maximum exposure, but all the exposure in the world won't help if the price or presentation is not effective. And then thirdly, there are many agents in the marketplace, but to put it bluntly, some of them are just in it for the paycheck or are doing it as a side hustle. So when trusting someone to sell your largest asset, I would say make sure they're doing real estate as a business and a career, that they're full-time, experienced, and local, and that they take a consultative approach, which means they're guided by your priorities and not their own. And because the last thing you want during a big change is surprises, choose a realtor who will be honest, transparent, and know exactly what to expect so you can feel empowered and confident moving forward. All right, so, I understand that everyone's situation is very different. And again, it's not just a real estate transaction. This is something that's part of the bigger picture of your life and your situation. So I encourage you to reach out and we can have a Zoom consult or just an old-fashioned phone conversation about your situation. I'd love to hear more about your specific goals and your questions, your concerns, and see what I can do to be helpful. It's always free and no obligation to have a consultation. I am also, safely going into people's homes too. So I'm happy to take a look at your home and provide you with a market analysis of what it would sell for in today's market, as well as the market dynamics of your neighborhood, because things are shifting and real estate's local, very hyper local. So it all depends on the property that you have and where exactly it is. So reach out via email or give me a call. That's my cell phone number, and I'm happy to talk more. So anybody have any questions before we sign off? Oh, something in the chat. Let's see. Oh, yes. So Wendy's asking, how far ahead should I start talking to a real estate agent? So I would say if you're thinking about selling anytime in the next even few years, it's never too early to start talking to your real estate agent, to reach out and get a sense of what the market dynamic is, what your potential home value is, and also if you're interested in doing anything in preparation for selling to maximize the value of your home, that's something we can talk about too. So yeah, I would say now, reach out now, because there's no harm in like talking too early to someone, and it could help. So does that answer your question? To boil it right down, I mean, I could turn a listing around in a week. I can do that. I can have your home on the market in a matter of a few days, but the more time, the better. Because just like anything, the more preparation you have, the more successful things tend to go. So rather than have, everything be last minute, let's, put time on our side. And once I know your goals, we can, you can use the time we have to our advantage to make sure that we get to your goals. Yeah. And, I think it bears repeating too. I did say earlier that right now the market's very, very hot for selling. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's a lot of variables, a lot of unknowns. Right now, the incredibly low interest rates are really driving the market because buyers can't afford to buy more. They can afford to pay more due to the fact that interest rates are so low. I have a chart I could share with you that shows visually how dramatically the interest rates affect the true cost of a home. And it's pretty incredible. A quarter or a half percentage point makes a huge difference. So as soon as those interest rates go up, and that's probably going to happen second quarter next year, that's going to have an impact on the real estate market. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I just know that right now it's an incredible time to sell. So again, if you're thinking about it, feel free to reach out and connect. And I'm never going to put pressure on you, but I want to keep you informed and knowing what's going on. Oh, your kitchen needs an update. An agent told you to leave it for the new buyer. Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really depends on your budget and your goals. I can sell a home in any condition. Absolutely. You don't have to lift a finger. And usually something as big as renovating a whole kitchen, might not be convenient for you to do that just to sell the home. Because again, that could take 6 months, right? And the market could change in that time frame. 6 months, a lot could change. So I would say, yeah, probably just leave it for the new buyer, unless you want to do, some more just easy kind of updates. But I would have to really take a look at the kitchen and kind of be able to advise you specifically on that. And that's kind of what that first consultation is for. So we could do that via Zoom, or I could swing by the house with my mask and gloves and take a quick look at it that way. And give you a better idea. It also depends like where you are, what the kind of buyer pool is there, to see if it's really worthwhile. I want you to get the most bang for your buck. So I would say let's look at that together via Zoom or in person for the kitchen. Nancy said, we are preparing our house now to sell. How long is it usually between accepting an offer and closing? Great question. So usually between accepted offer and closing, it's about 45 days, about 6 weeks. That's the typical time frame when the buyer has a mortgage, which is, usually what happens. They have to have the mortgage approved. So that process takes about 3 to 4 weeks, and that's the majority of that time. Thanks, Christina. Thanks for coming. So again, though, Nancy, because it's a seller's market, we can extend that timeline too. So it's not uncommon for a seller to say, I'd prefer a 60-day closing or even a 90-day closing, or to do the UNO that I mentioned earlier, which is a use and occupancy or rent back. So that means that you can close on the property, but rent back for up to 60 days after the closing. So you can continue to live there. So I don't know if that's something where you want more time or if you're looking to move as soon as possible, but those are some options that you have available to you to determine the timing of the sale and your move. But to answer your question, yes, typically 45 days. These are great questions, you guys. I mean, I could sit here and talk about this all day. So feel free to shout out more questions. Yeah, so given that 45 days is the standard timeline, you're looking for a quick closing. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So that's perfect. So you're probably gonna get it if you're priced right. 45 days. So yeah, we would be bumping right up to that end of November at this point. So cool. Yeah, I was just gonna say that we're really getting to the point where we closings are kind of being squeezed in toward the end of the year at this point, because it's unbelievable. We're almost at the end of the year. Great. Well, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for carving out this time to be here today. I hope it was helpful, and look forward to hopefully connecting with some of you one-on-one and learning more about how I can help out. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye, guys.